Just eating, getting into my little dark chocolate mint. Yummy. Probably have chocolate teeth. Let's see, we were in the midst of a chapter, and the last thing I said or read was, and this is talking to the tennis dude. What's his name? Do we know? Well, anyway, the tennis guy, Raymond Starr, maybe? Yeah, tennis lesson that Raymond Starr was giving. And she said, "All this must be very boring for you," said Miss Marple. I said Maple. Raymond said simply, "It is sometimes, especially at the end of the summer. For a time the thought of the pay buoys you up, but even that fails to stimulate imagination in the end." Superintendent Harper got up. He said abruptly, "I'll call for you in half an hour's time, Miss Marple, if that will be all right." "Perfectly, thank you. I shall be ready." Harper went off. Raymond stood looking after him, and then he said, "Mind if I sit here for a bit?" "Do," said Sir Henry. "Have a cigarette?" He offered his case, wondering as he did so why he had a slight feeling of prejudice against Raymond Starr. Was it simply because he was a professional tennis coach and dancer? If so, it wasn't the tennis, it was the dancing. The English, Sir Henry decided, had a distrust for any man who danced too well. This fellow moved with too much grace. Raymond, which was his name? Abruptly he asked the question. The other seemed amused. Ramon was my original professional name. Ramon and Josie. Spanish effect, you know. Then there was rather a prejudice against foreigners, so I became Raymond, very British. Miss Marple said, "And is your real name something quite different?" He smiled at her. "Actually, my real name is Ramon. I had an Argentine grandmother, you see." And in parentheses it says, "And that accounts for that swing from the hips," thought Sir Henry parenthetically. "But my first name is Thomas," painfully prosaic. He turned to Sir Henry. "You come from Devonshire, don't you, sir?" "From Stane?" "My people live down that way at Almonston." Sir Henry's face lit up. "Are you one of the Almonston Stars?" "I didn't realize that." "No, I don't suppose you would." There was a slight bitterness in his voice. Sir Henry said awkwardly, "Bad luck, all that." "The place being sold up after it had been in the family for 300 years? Yes, it was rather. Still, our kind have to go, I suppose. We've outlived our usefulness. My elder brother went to New York. He's in publishing, doing well. The rest of us are scattered up and down the earth. I'll say it's hard to get a job nowadays when you've had nothing to say for yourself except you've had a public school education. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you get taken on as a reception clerk at a hotel. The tie and the manner are an asset there. The only job I could get was showman in a plumbing establishment, selling superb peach and lemon-colored porcelain baths. Enormous showrooms, but as I never knew the price of the damn things or how soon we could deliver them, I got fired. The only things I could do were dance and play tennis. I got taken on at a hotel on the Riviera. Good pickings there. I suppose I was doing well. Then I overheard an old colonel, real old colonel, incredibly ancient, British to the backbone, and always talking about Poona. He went up to the manager and said at the top of his voice, "Where's the gigolo? I want to get hold of the gigolo. My wife and daughter want to dance. You know, where is the feller? What does he sting you for? It's the gigolo I want." Raymond went on. Silly to mind, but I did. I chucked it. Came here, less pay but pleasanter work, mostly teaching tennis to rotund women who will never, never, never be able to play. That and dancing with the neglected wallflower daughters of rich clients. Oh well, it's life, I suppose. Excuse today's hard luck story. He laughed. His teeth flashed out white. His eyes crinkled up at the corners. He looked suddenly healthy and happy and very much alive. Sir Henry said, I'm glad to have a chat with you. I've been wanting to talk with you. About Ruby King? I can't help you, you know. I don't know who killed her. I knew very little about her. She didn't confide in me. Miss Marple said, Did you like her? Not particularly. I didn't dislike her. His voice was careless, uninterested. Sir Henry said, So you've no suggestions to offer? I'm afraid not. I'd have told Harper if I had. It just seems to me one of those things. Petty, sordid little crime. Petty? No clues, no motive. Two people had a motive, said Miss Marple. Sir Henry looked at her sharply. Really? Raymond looked surprised. Miss Marple looked insistently at Sir Henry, and he said rather unwillingly, Her death probably benefits Mrs. Jefferson and Mr. Gaskell to the amount of £50,000. What? Raymond looked really startled, more than startled, upset. Oh, but that's absurd. Absolutely absurd. Mrs. Jefferson, neither of them could have had anything to do with it. It would be incredible to think of such a thing. Miss Marple coughed. She said gently, I'm afraid, you know, you're rather an idealist. I? He laughed. Not me. I'm a hard-boiled cynic. Money, said Miss Marple, is a very powerful motive. Perhaps, Raymond said hotly, but that either of those two would strangle a girl in cold blood? He shook his head. Then he got up. Here's Mrs. Jefferson now, come for her lesson. She's late. His voice sounded amused. 10 minutes late. Adelaide Jefferson and Hugo McLean were walking rapidly down the path towards them. With a smiling apology for her lateness, Addie Jefferson went on to the court. McLean sat down on the bench. After a polite inquiry whether Miss Marple minded a pipe, he lit it and puffed for some minutes in silence. Watching critically the two white figures about the tennis court, he said at last, Can't see what Addie wants to have lessons for. Have a game? Yes, no one enjoys it better than I do, but why lessons? Wants to improve her game, said Sir Henry. She's not a bad player, said Hugo. Good enough, at all events. Dash it all, she isn't aiming to play at Wimbledon. He was silent for a minute or two, and then he said, Who is this Raymond fellow? Where do they come from, these pros? Fellow looks like a dago to me. He's one of the Devonshire stars, said Sir Henry. What? Not really. Sir Henry nodded. It was clear that this news was unpleasing to Hugo McLean. He scowled more than ever. He said, Don't know why Addie sent for me. She seems not to have turned a hair over this business. Never looked better. Why send for me? Sir Henry asked with some curiosity, When did she send for you? When all this happened. How did you hear? Telephone or telegram? Telegram. As a matter of curiosity, when was it sent off? Well, I don't know exactly. What time did you receive it? I didn't exactly receive it. It was telephoned on to me, as a matter of fact. Why, where were you? Fact is, I'd left London the afternoon before. I was staying at Danbury Head. What? Quite near here? Yes, rather funny, wasn't it? Got the message when I got in from a round of golf and came over here at once. Miss Marple gazed at him thoughtfully. He looked hot and uncomfortable. She said, I've heard it's very pleasant at Danbury Head and not very expensive. No, it's not very expensive. No, it's not expensive. I couldn't afford it if it was. It's a nice little place. We must drive over there one day, said Miss Marple. What? Oh, yes. You should. He got up. Better take some exercise, get an appetite. He walked away stiffly. Women, said Sir Henry, treat their devoted admirers very badly. Miss Marple smiled but made no answer. Does he strike you as rather a dull dog? Asked Sir Henry. I'd be interested to know. A little limited in his ideas, perhaps, said Miss Marple, but with possibilities, I think. Oh, definitely possibilities. Sir Henry, in his turn, got up. It's time for me to go and do my stuff. I see Mrs. Bantry is on her way to keep you company. Mrs. Bantry arrived breathless and sat down with a gasp. She said, I've been talking to chambermaids, but it isn't any good. I haven't found out a thing more. Do you think that girl can really have been carrying on with someone without everybody in the hotel knowing all about it? That's a very interesting point, dear. I should say definitely not. Somebody knows, depend upon it, if it's true. But she must have been very clever about it. Mrs. Bantry's attention had strayed to the tennis court. She said approvingly, Addie's tennis is coming on a lot. Attractive young man, that tennis pro. Addie's looking quite nice looking. She's still an attractive woman. I shouldn't be at all surprised if she married again. She'll be a rich woman, too, when Mr. Jefferson dies, said Miss Marple. Oh, don't always have such a nasty mind, Jane. Why haven't you solved this mystery yet? We don't seem to be getting on at all. I thought you'd know at once. Mrs. Bantry's tone held reproach. No, dear. I didn't know at once, not for some time. Mrs. Bantry turned startled and incredulous eyes on her. You mean you know now? Who killed Ruby Keene? Oh, yes, said Miss Marple. I know that. But Jane, who is it? Tell me at once. Miss Marple shook her head very firmly and pursed up her lips. I'm sorry, Dolly, but that wouldn't do at all. Why wouldn't it do? Because you're so indiscreet. You would go around telling everyone. Or if you didn't tell, you'd hint. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't tell a soul. People who use that phrase are always the last to live up to it. It's no good, dear. There's a long way to go yet. A great many things that are quite obscure. You remember when I was so against letting Mrs. Partridge collect for the Red Cross, and I couldn't say why? The reason was that her nose had twitched in just the same way that maid of mine, Alice, twitched her nose when I sent her out to pay the books. I always paid them a shilling or so short and said it could go on to the next week's account, which of course was exactly what Mrs. Partridge did, only on a much larger scale. 75 pounds it was she embezzled. Never mind, Mrs. Partridge, said Mrs. Bantry, but I had to explain to you, and if you care, I'll give you a hint. The trouble in this case is that everybody has been much too credulous and believing. You simply cannot afford to believe everything that people tell you. When there's anything fishy about, I never believe anyone at all. You see, I know human nature so well. Mrs. Bantry was silent for a minute or two, and then she said in a different tone of voice, I told you, didn't I, that I didn't see why I shouldn't enjoy myself over this case. A real murder in my own house, the sort of thing that will never happen again. I hope not, said Miss Marple. Well, so do I, really. Once is enough, but it's my murder, Jane. I want to employ myself over it. Miss Marple shot a glance at her. Mrs. Bantry said belligerently, Don't you believe that? As Miss Marple said sweetly, Of course, Dolly, if you tell me so. Yes, but you would never believe what people call... Hang on, but you never believe what people tell you, do you? You've just said so. Well, you're quite right. Mrs. Bantry's voice took on a sudden bitter note. She said, I'm not altogether a fool. You may think, Jane, that I don't know what you're saying all over St. Mary Mead, all over the county. They're saying, one and all, that there's no smoke without fire, that if the girl was found in Arthur's library, then Arthur must know something about it. They're saying that the girl was Arthur's mistress, that she was his legitimate daughter, that she was blackmailing him. They're saying anything that comes into their damned heads. And it'll go on like that. Arthur won't realize it at first. He won't know what's wrong. He's such a dear old stupid that he'd never believe people would think things like that about him. He'll be cold-shouldered and looked at askance, in parentheses, whatever that means, and it will dawn on him little by little, and suddenly he'll be horrified and cut to the soul, and he'll fasten up like a clam and just endure day after day in misery. It's because of all that's going to happen to him that I've come here to ferret out every single thing about it that I can. This murder's got to be solved. If it isn't, then Arthur's whole life will be wrecked, and I won't have that happen. I won't. She paused for a minute and said, I won't have the dear old boy go through hell for something he didn't do. That's the only reason I came to Denimouth and left him alone at home, to think out the truth. I know, dear, said Miss Marple. That's why I'm here, too. And I'm going to stop there. That's the end of 13. And hopefully I'll read 14 tomorrow. Y'all have a wonderfully crafty night. And see you later in the YT streets. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Bye-bye.